The United States is about to slam its doors shut. A seismic policy shift is imminent, one that will directly impact millions across Africa and beyond. The Biden administration is preparing to suspend immigrant visa processing for citizens of 75 countries, including Uganda and Tanzania. This isn't just a headline, it's a potential humanitarian and diplomatic earthquake. Some call it a necessary security overhaul, a long overdue fix to a broken system. Others condemn it as a devastating betrayal, a discriminatory policy wrapped in bureaucratic language. Who's right? And what does this mean for families, for students, for dreams put on hold indefinitely? This is Kenya News Update today, and we're diving deep into a story that hits close to home. To understand this bombshell, we need to rewind. The roots of this move stretch back years to a persistent problem for U.S. embassies worldwide: visa backlogs. We're talking about a massive, tangled queue. Currently, over 4 million people are waiting for family-sponsored immigrant visas alone. In some countries, the wait can exceed a decade. The system is choked. The specific trigger, according to our sources, is a severe and chronic shortage of consular officers, the officials who actually conduct visa interviews. The State Department has been understaffed for years, a situation worsened by budget battles and hiring freezes. The pandemic created a massive backlog, and they've never truly caught up. Now, enter a little-known but powerful bureaucratic tool, Section 243 of the Immigration and Nationality Act. This is the legal hammer. It allows the Secretary of State to order consular sections to stop issuing all visas, tourist, business, immigrant, to countries that deny or unreasonably delay accepting their citizens who have been ordered deported from the U.S. It's meant as leverage. In the past, this sanction was used narrowly, often against a handful of recalcitrant countries. But the new proposal, as reported by multiple outlets including the Associated Press and Reuters, is unprecedented in scale. Instead of punishing specific countries for deportation non-cooperation, the administration is considering a blanket, proactive suspension for 75 nations. The goal: to reallocate their scarce consular staff away from these countries' massive immigrant visa queues and towards clearing the tourist and business visa backlogs, which generate crucial fee revenue for the embassies. The countries reportedly on the list are diverse, from Uganda and Tanzania to Bangladesh, Pakistan, and even U.S. allies like the Philippines and India. The central tension is clear. Is this a pragmatic, if brutal, triage of a failing system? Or is it a policy of exclusion that will disproportionately target the global south? Let's start with the perspective of those who support or justify this drastic measure. Proponents argue this is not about prejudice, but about cold, hard administrative reality. They point to a system in crisis. Supporters, often policy analysts focused on system efficiency, argue the U.S. visa apparatus is buckling under its own weight. With too few officers and too many applications, something has to give. By temporarily suspending the most complex, time-consuming visa category, immigrant visas, they can free up hundreds of hours of officer time. This time can then be redirected to process non-immigrant visas, tourists, business travelers, students. These visas are quicker to adjudicate, and critically, they bring in over $3 billion in application fees annually. That revenue is the lifeblood that keeps embassies running globally. Their strongest argument: this is a temporary triage, not a permanent ban. The goal, they say, is to use this shock therapy to clear the overwhelming backlog of visitor visas, stabilize embassy finances, and eventually return to normal processing for all categories with a more manageable workload. They frame it as a short-term pain for long-term gain. One insider quoted by Politico framed it as, "We have to stop the bleeding before we can perform surgery." Furthermore, they point out that the affected immigrant visa applicants are, by definition, already in a years-long queue. A further pause of 6 to 12 months, while painful, doesn't fundamentally alter a wait that was already measured in years. The priority, from this system's management view, must be the overall health of the diplomatic and consular system. They also note that certain humanitarian categories, like refugees and fiancé visas, are likely to be exempted, showing the move isn't heartless but strategic. Proponents conclude you cannot pour from an empty cup. The embassies are empty. This is the only way to refill them. But wait, there's another side to this story. Critics, however, see it differently. They argue this policy is a catastrophic failure of governance that will shatter lives and damage America's global standing. Immigration attorneys, diaspora advocacy groups, and human rights organizations are sounding the alarm. They counter that this isn't administrative triage, it's the weaponization of bureaucracy against predominantly brown and black nations. Of the 75 countries listed, a significant majority are in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. The optics, they say, are inescapable and damning. Opponents point out the profound human impact this suspension will have. We're not just talking about delayed paperwork. We're talking about a parent missing the birth of a grandchild in the US, a spouse separated from their partner for years more than already planned, a doctor or engineer whose skills are needed, stuck in limbo. The mental health toll, the financial strain of prolonged separation, the crumbling of carefully laid life plans, this is the real cost. As one immigration lawyer told The Hill, they are treating human beings like inventory in a warehouse that's too full. You can't just put a pause on people's lives and dreams. Their strongest counter-argument? This solves nothing. It merely moves the backlog from one line to another. It punishes law-abiding, hopeful immigrants for the U.S. government's own failure to properly staff and fund its consulates. The real solution, critics argue, is for Congress to approve more funding and for the State Department to launch an aggressive hiring and training campaign. They see this suspension as a cynical shortcut that sacrifices the most vulnerable applicants. Furthermore, skeptics point out the diplomatic fallout. How will the U.S. explain to allies like India or the Philippines that their citizens are being barred because America can't manage its own paperwork? It risks being seen as a profound insult, a breach of trust that could ripple through economic and security partnerships. So who's right? Let's look at the evidence. Let's step back from the heated rhetoric and look at the numbers. The data paints a picture of a system at its breaking point. According to State Department figures, in fiscal year 2023, the U.S. issued over 6.4 million non-immigrant visas worldwide. But the immigrant visa backlog remains stubbornly over 400,000 cases pending at the National Visa Center alone, before they even reach an embassy for an interview. In Nairobi, for instance, wait times for some family-based immigrant visa categories are currently listed at over 5 years. The shortage of officers is quantifiable. A 2023 Government Accountability Office report found the State Department has consistently failed to meet its own staffing targets for consular officers for over a decade. Expert analysis from neutral sources like the Migration Policy Institute suggests that while backlogs are a real crisis, blanket suspensions are a blunt and problematic instrument. They note that previous targeted uses of Section 243 did pressure countries to accept deportees, but the effect on overall visa processing was mixed and often created new backlogs. International comparisons are telling. Other countries with high immigration demand, like Canada and Australia, have also faced backlogs post-pandemic. Their response, however, has largely focused on digital modernization, hiring surges, and targeted increases in immigration levels, not blanket suspensions of entire categories for specific nationalities. The data suggests the U.S. is opting for a uniquely disruptive path. Experts note that the financial argument has merit, visa fees are essential, but question the morality and long-term wisdom of balancing the books on the backs of families seeking permanent reunion. The evidence shows a system in desperate need of repair, but the proposed fix appears disproportionately severe and risks violating the principle of fairness that should underpin immigration policy. The reality is more complex than either side fully admits. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The proponents are correct that the U.S. consular system is dysfunctional and underfunded. It is breaking. Doing nothing is not an option. The pressure to generate fees from visitor visas is a real budgetary constraint that drives embassy operations. However, the critics are overwhelmingly right about the fundamental injustice of this specific solution. Punishing 75 countries for America's own failure to staff its embassies is a profound abdication of responsibility. It confuses cause and effect. The backlog isn't the fault of a Ugandan spouse waiting to join her husband. It's the fault of congressional austerity and administrative neglect. What most people miss is the dangerous precedent this sets. It normalizes the idea that the legal immigration system, a system of rules and promises, can be switched off for entire continents with a bureaucratic memo. It tells the world that America's promise of family unity is negotiable, contingent on budget spreadsheets. The nuanced, messy, but necessary work of hiring more officers, streamlining processes, and lobbying for funds is being abandoned for a clean, cruel, and ultimately short-sighted cut. The verdict? This is a policy of desperation, not innovation. It addresses a symptom, consular overload, by inflicting a deep wound on the legitimacy of the U.S. immigration system and on thousands of innocent lives caught in the crossfire. For ordinary people, the impact is visceral and immediate. Across Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and beyond, families are now in a panic. Those who have waited years, who have paid thousands in fees, who have medical exams expiring, are facing the nightmare of an indefinite pause. Lawyers' phones are ringing off the hook. Community groups are scrambling for information. The uncertainty is the cruelest part. What to watch for next? First, the official announcement and the exact list of countries. Second, the duration. Will it be 6 months, a year longer? Third, any exemptions for children, the elderly, or medical emergencies. Fourth, and most importantly, the legal challenges. Major immigration law firms and advocacy groups are already preparing lawsuits, arguing the move is arbitrary, capricious, and discriminatory. Predictions? This policy will likely be implemented in some form, causing immediate hardship. But it will also face fierce legal and congressional opposition, potentially leading to a modified or shortened suspension. The long-term outcome may finally force the serious conversation about consular funding that Washington has avoided for years. So there you have it. The great visa suspension debate, a necessary system reset or a humanitarian misstep, a pragmatic pause or a discriminatory policy. Now I want to hear from you. This story is about real people, real families. What do you think? Are you Team A, this is a hard but necessary administrative fix? Or Team B, this is an unjust and damaging policy failure? Drop a 1 in the comments if you agree with the proponents, a 2 if you side with the critics. Let's get a debate going below. Share this with someone who needs to see both sides of this story. For continued, in-depth coverage of this developing story and how it impacts our region, subscribe to Kenya News Update today for more breaking news.